Title: The Silent Struggle, Unveiling the Erosion of Workers' Rights in America. Introduction. Welcome to The Silent Struggle, Unveiling the Erosion of Workers' Rights in America. This book delves into the critical issues facing workers across the nation, issues that have been overlooked, ignored, or silenced for far too long. From the dismantling of workers' compensation systems to the exploitation of labor in modern industries, we explore how systemic challenges undermine the rights and dignity of American workers. In this comprehensive examination, we delve into personal stories that highlight the human cost of systemic failures. We examine paradoxes within political advocacy, particularly in states renowned for their progressive politics yet facing challenges in adequately protecting injured workers. We also include voices from the ground, workers' stories and expressions that bring to life the struggles faced by those who have been let down by the very systems meant to protect them. By bringing these hidden struggles to light, we aim to ignite a conversation and inspire collective action toward meaningful reform. Join us as we give voice to the voiceless and strive to restore fairness, dignity, and justice to the American workforce. Chapter 1: The Erosion of the Grand Bargain. Historical foundations. In the early 20th century, American workers faced hazardous conditions with little protection. Factories were perilous, and industrial accidents were common. Upton Sinclair's novel The Jungle vividly depicted these harsh realities, highlighting the need for systemic change. The Grand Bargain was established as a mutual agreement between employers and employees. Workers relinquished the right to sue employers over workplace injuries in exchange for guaranteed workers' compensation benefits. This system was designed to provide swift medical care and income support to injured workers while protecting employers from costly lawsuits. State control and variations. Each state developed its own workers' compensation system, leading to significant variations in benefits and protections. While the Grand Bargain aimed for fairness, the lack of federal oversight meant that the quality and generosity of benefits depended largely on state policies. Erosion over time. Since the 1990s, many states have enacted laws reducing benefits and tightening eligibility. Investigations like the demolition of workers' compensation by ProPublica and NPR revealed that benefits have been cut, leaving many without adequate support. Corporate influence has grown, with large corporations lobbying for lower workers' compensation costs, reminiscent of the exploitation during the era of the robber barons. Over the last decade, workers have lost approximately 15% of their Grand Bargain benefits, undermining the original intent of the system. Unions, traditionally strong advocates for workers, have been criticized for not adequately addressing the erosion of workers' compensation benefits. Modern-day challenges. The erosion of the Grand Bargain has led to a patchwork of protections, with significant disparities between states. Workers performing the same job in different states may receive vastly different compensation for identical injuries. This inconsistency has created a system where workers' rights are dependent on their geographical location, leading to inequality and injustice. Chapter 2: The Inaccessible Justice System. The struggle for legal representation. Injured workers often find themselves navigating complex legal systems without the assistance of an attorney. Many cannot afford legal representation, and pro bono services are stretched thin. Lawyers may decline cases that don't promise significant financial returns, leaving workers to represent themselves in Social Security, disability insurance disputes, and workers' compensation claims. Forced to go pro se without legal expertise, workers must interpret intricate regulations and procedures. The lack of representation can lead to unfavorable outcomes, as workers may miss critical deadlines or fail to present necessary evidence. Self-representation adds stress to an already difficult situation, potentially exacerbating health issues. Systemic issues. Government agencies often have complex rules that are difficult for non-lawyers to understand. Administrative errors can lead to wrongful overpayment claims, yet the burden falls on the individual to prove otherwise. The access to justice gap is significant, with a substantial portion of low-income Americans facing civil legal issues without adequate legal assistance. Chapter 3: The Civil Legal Aid Crisis. No right to counsel in civil cases. Unlike in criminal cases, there is no universal right to an attorney in civil matters. This gap leaves many vulnerable individuals to fend for themselves in disputes over essential needs like housing, healthcare, and income. Legal aid limitations. Legal aid organizations are overwhelmed, able to assist only a fraction of those in need. Strict income thresholds and limited resources mean many do not qualify for assistance. Rural areas often lack adequate legal services, creating legal deserts. Impact on workers without representation. Workers are at a significant disadvantage against corporations and government agencies. Mistakes in legal proceedings can lead to the loss of crucial benefits, housing, or even custody of children. Legal issues can compound, leading to financial instability and homelessness. Chapter 4: First Responders and the Silent Battle with PTSD. The hidden wounds. First responders, including police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical personnel, face traumatic situations regularly. Exposure to life-threatening events, accidents, and violence can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. Challenges in acknowledgement and support. Mental health struggles are often stigmatized, leading to underreporting and lack of treatment. Many states have stringent requirements for proving PTSD is work-related, making it difficult for first responders to receive benefits. Despite awareness, legislative efforts to provide presumptive coverage for PTSD often stall or face opposition. Impact on first responders. High rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicide are prevalent among first responders. Access to mental health services and support systems is crucial for recovery and well-being. Chapter 5: Surveillance and its impact on injured workers. Mental health. The practice of surveillance. Surveillance is a common tactic used by insurance companies in workers' compensation cases to investigate potential fraud. Private investigators may follow injured workers, recording their activities without their knowledge. Mental health implications. Being surveilled can cause feelings of paranoia, anxiety, and humiliation. For those already dealing with mental health issues, surveillance can worsen symptoms. The practice undermines trust between workers and the systems meant to support them. Case studies and reports. Articles like How Spying on Injured Workers Often Adds to Their Pain highlight how surveillance can lead to unjust denial of benefits and mental anguish. Stress from surveillance can impede physical healing and delay a return to work. Chapter 6: Barriers in the workers' compensation and SSDI systems. Denial of claims and use of law enforcement. There are instances where law enforcement is used to challenge or deny workers' compensation and SSDI claims. Workers may face legal threats or actions that discourage them from pursuing rightful benefits. Systemic challenges. Navigating the claims process is often complicated and adversarial. Excessive paperwork, strict deadlines, and bureaucratic obstacles hinder access to benefits. The stress of fighting for benefits can lead to or exacerbate mental health issues. Chapter 7: Political Inaction and the Call for Accountability. A deafening silence. Despite the staggering number of non-fatal workplace injuries and illnesses reported nationwide, there has been a lack of federal protections and comprehensive reforms. Some political representatives have not taken decisive action to address the urgent issues facing injured workers. Local lawmakers' responses. Reports indicate that some local lawmakers use legal means to silence or penalize workers who speak out. Avoidance of accountability and inadequate responses contribute to the ongoing struggles of injured workers. The need for accountability. Proposed solutions like increased OSHA inspectors and funding, while important, do not tackle the fundamental injustices within the workers' compensation system. A collective shrug to the workers' plight amounts to a dereliction of duty. The call to action. There is an urgent need to enforce minimum federal standards to protect workers, a need that has been recognized since 1972. Legislators, unions, and political parties must stand up, speak out, and represent the interests of America's workers. Chapter 8: The Burden of Self-Representation. Legal system complexity. Court processes are intricate, and without legal training, workers struggle to defend their rights. Pro-se litigants often face unfavorable judgments due to lack of legal expertise. Emotional and financial strain. The pressure of self-representation can lead to anxiety, depression, and other health issues. Loss of benefits or unfavorable rulings can result in poverty, homelessness, or inability to access medical care. Systemic barriers. Legal resources are not always readily available or understandable to non-lawyers. The legal system may favor those with representation, perpetuating inequality. Chapter 9. The erosion of regulatory protections. Supreme Court decisions and their impact. Recent legal decisions have reduced the power of federal agencies to interpret laws, impacting regulations that protect workers. Overturning Chevron deference limits agencies like OSHA in implementing and enforcing safety standards. Implications for workers. Reduced regulatory power may lead to weakened enforcement of safety standards. Without strong regulatory protections, workers are more vulnerable to unsafe working conditions and exploitation. Need for federal legislation. In light of reduced agency power, there is a greater need for clear federal laws to protect workers' rights. Federal legislation can ensure consistent protections across all states. Chapter 10. The need for a national workers' compensation commission. Challenges with state-based systems. Varied laws lead to unequal treatment and benefits. Limitations of state reforms mean that, without federal oversight, gaps in protection remain. The disparities between states create injustices for workers. Arguments for federal oversight. A national commission could ensure consistent rights and benefits. Standardizing protections would address the inconsistencies that currently exist. Integrating workers' compensation with healthcare reforms can prevent exclusions and provide comprehensive coverage. Advocacy for inclusion. Policy recommendations include establishing a national workers' compensation commission in progressive agendas. Encouraging leaders and organizations to prioritize injured workers' rights is essential for meaningful reform. Chapter 11. Integrating workers' rights into broader movements. Interconnected challenges. Healthcare reform must ensure that all proposals address the needs of injured workers. Economic justice efforts must tackle income inequality and the lack of support for non-unionized workers. The labor movement must expand advocacy to represent all workers, including the most vulnerable. Holistic approaches. Crafting legislation that addresses multiple issues simultaneously is crucial. Collaboration across movements unites various advocacy groups for stronger impact. Recognizing the interconnectedness of workers' rights with other social justice issues strengthens the overall movement. Chapter 12. A call to action for leaders and communities. Political leaders. Officials must listen to workers and advocate for federal protections. Introducing legislation that addresses workers' compensation, mental health support, and legal aid access is imperative. Faith leaders. Faith communities can highlight workers' rights as a moral imperative. Providing resources and support to those navigating legal challenges can make a significant difference. Unions and organizations, including workers' compensation and legal representation and advocacy efforts, is essential. Informing members about the importance of comprehensive workers' rights empowers them to take action. Chapter 13. A personal journey through a broken system. Generational struggles. In the mid-1970s, a young boy named Darren Fonso witnessed a life-altering event that would shape his understanding of the workers' compensation system and its profound flaws. His stepfather, Vern Leroy Fields, suffered a devastating workplace accident. At just 7 years old, Darren saw his stepfather endure a traumatic arm amputation resulting from a fall off a grain silo in 1976. A family's fight. The accident plunged the family into a 9-year battle with the state workers' compensation system and the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. Moving from state to state, they struggled to survive as Vern faced bureaucratic obstacles and delays. The legal battles drained the family's resources and tested their resilience. Darren's parents were forced to become de facto experts in navigating complex legal and medical systems, often without adequate support or representation. History repeats itself. Decades later, Darren found himself entangled in a similar struggle. After sustaining his own workplace injury, he faced an 8-year fight with the workers' compensation system, followed by an additional 3 years battling SSDI over overpayments and the convoluted SSDI workers' compensation offset processes. Like his parents before him, he was forced to represent himself legally, becoming a pro-SE litigant in a system stacked against him. Legal challenges and personal costs. The stress and frustration led to confrontations with doctors and judges over his case and the lack of adequate care. These conflicts resulted in him being jailed multiple times. Rather than receiving support and understanding, he faced harassment charges from state lawmakers, seemingly aimed at silencing his advocacy for systemic reform. A tragic loss amid his own battles, tragedy struck again. His father-in-law, a hard-working immigrant from Mexico, suffered an on-the-job injury while working at Walmart. Despite being 62 years old and managing pre-existing diabetes, he was pushed to return to work prematurely. The medical professionals and employer appeared more concerned with minimizing costs than addressing the severity of his condition. His health deteriorated rapidly, and he ultimately passed away, a preventable death resulting from systemic negligence. Mental health struggles and institutional betrayal. These experiences took a significant toll on Darren's mental health. Mental health professionals refer to his situation as social and institutional betrayal, recognizing the profound impact of being repeatedly let down by systems designed to protect workers. The generational trauma, his stepfather, his father-in-law, and himself, all harmed by the same broken systems, highlighted the urgent need for comprehensive reform. Fighting for justice despite the immense challenges, Darren persisted. Ultimately, he secured his SSDI benefits and a lifetime pension from the Washington State Workers' Compensation System, including an annuity for his spouse. While he prevailed in his personal battle, he remained acutely aware that no worker should have to endure such hardship to receive rightful benefits. A call for change. His story underscores the human cost of a system that too often prioritizes cost containment over care. Workers are forced through prolonged legal struggles, facing financial ruin and mental health crises, just to obtain basic support after workplace injuries. The systemic failures not only harm individuals but also tear apart families and communities. Chapter 14: The Paradox of Political Advocacy in Washington State. A progressive reputation with lingering contradictions. Washington State is often celebrated for its progressive politics, particularly in areas like labor rights and union advocacy. The state has been at the forefront of many labor movements, enacting policies intended to protect workers and promote fairness. However, beneath this progressive veneer lies a paradox that challenges the very notion of representation and advocacy. Celebrated advocates and systemic shortcomings. Take, for instance, state officials who have been recognized for their advocacy on behalf of unions and injured workers, such as Attorney General Bob Ferguson. He has garnered accolades for defending the rights of Hanford nuclear site workers against the federal government. Yet, while he has been busy collecting commendations, concerns have been raised about the state's medical boards and their handling of cases involving doctors who harm workers. This juxtaposition raises perplexing questions about systemic issues that may persist despite individual efforts. Contradictory relationships. Venturing further into the political landscape, we encounter figures like former State Representative Mike Sells, after whom the Washington State Labor Council named an award. The first recipient of the Representative Mike Sells Labor Champion Award was State Representative Mary Foss. However, it's important to consider the broader context and challenges faced by injured workers in the state, highlighting the need for continuous evaluation of how effectively leaders are addressing these concerns. Voices without shared experiences. Prominent voices advocating for labor in Washington state include U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal and Seattle City Council member Shama Sawant. They are among the most vocal proponents of workers' rights. While they have championed significant labor initiatives, some critics point out that they may not have first-hand experience with manual labor or union membership, raising discussions about the importance of lived experience in advocacy. The unresolved paradox. This paradox challenges us to question the dynamics of representation and advocacy. In a state renowned for its progressive politics and dedication to labor, it's crucial to examine how well the needs of injured workers are being met. Recognizing these complexities encourages a more nuanced understanding of the political landscape and the effectiveness of advocacy efforts. Seeking accountability and authentic representation. The situation in Washington state underscores the need for authentic representation. Advocates and leaders who not only speak for workers but also understand and address their real-world challenges. It calls for transparency and accountability from those in positions of power. By acknowledging these dynamics, there is an opportunity to strengthen the state's progressive values and ensure they translate into tangible protections and support for all workers, especially those injured and marginalized. Chapter 15, The Hypocrisy of Silence, Addressing Overlooked Advocacy, Selective Advocacy, and Its Consequences in the Pursuit of Equality and Justice for All. It's important to address instances where advocacy may be selective or insufficient. Concerns have been raised about certain leaders and organizations in Washington state and their engagement with injured workers' rights. Commitment to equality advocates like Darren, who have personal connections to multiple communities, emphasize the importance of inclusive advocacy. Growing up with a gay brother and raising a son who identifies as bisexual, Darren has been a lifelong supporter of LGBTQ rights. This commitment extends to all areas of human rights, including the rights of injured workers. Calls for comprehensive support. There is a call for leaders across all communities, including LGBTQ leaders in Washington state, to actively support efforts for federal oversight of state workers' compensation systems. Figures like Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Patty Murray, and former Secretary of Labor Tom Perez have highlighted the need for such oversight to address systemic failures. The importance of unified advocacy. True advocacy means fighting for justice for all, not just when it aligns with specific interests. It's essential for leaders and organizations to extend their support to all marginalized groups, including injured workers. By doing so, they honor the principles of equality and justice that underpin broader movements for social change. Moving forward together, the goal is to foster an environment where all leaders and advocates work collaboratively to address systemic issues affecting workers. This includes recognizing and addressing any gaps in advocacy to ensure that no group is overlooked or marginalized in the fight for justice. Chapter 16, Voices from the Ground, Expressions of Struggle and Hope. The power of expression. Workers across the nation have found various ways to express their frustrations, hopes, and calls for justice. Through songs, poems, and personal narratives, they give voice to the silent struggle that many endure. These expressions not only highlight individual pain but also unite workers in a shared quest for dignity and rights. A song for justice. They say we're the backbone, the heart of this land. We build the cities, we work with our hands. From dawn till dusk, we give it our all, but when we fall, who answers the call? Injured and broken, we're left in despair, a system that's failing, it just isn't fair. Across 50 states, a patchwork of pain, we cry out for justice again and again. We need a national voice to hear our plight, basic human rights for workers fight. No more disparity, no more delay, a workers' compensation commission today. An arm in one state is worth a fortune so grand, in another, just pennies. It's hard to understand. The bargain we made is slipping away. Unions and leaders, why do you stray? From Bernie to Biden, to Trump and beyond, we've been calling you out, it's time to respond. Faith leaders, unions, stand up and see, workers need justice, we need to be free. Equal rights for all from sea to shining sea, federal standards, that's how it should be. No more profits over lives, no more silent cries, we'll stand together, our voices will rise. From the fields to the factories, the offices too, every worker deserves what is true. With a pen and a promise, let's pave the way for justice and fairness, starting today. Reflections on the song. This song encapsulates the frustrations and aspirations of workers who feel unseen and unheard. It calls for unity among workers, leaders, and institutions to address the systemic failures in the workers' compensation system. The lyrics highlight the inconsistencies across states, the eroding of the original grand bargain, and the need for federal standards to ensure equality and justice. The role of art in advocacy. Artistic expressions like this song play a crucial role in movements for social change. They humanize abstract policy discussions, evoke emotional responses, and can mobilize people to action. By sharing stories and emotions through art, workers can reach a broader audience and foster a sense of solidarity. Chapter 17, Overcoming Barriers, Stories of Resilience. Voices silenced and censored. In an age where social media platforms are avenues for advocacy and awareness, some workers find their voices silenced. Instances of accounts being locked or individuals being blocked by public figures highlight the challenges faced when attempting to hold leaders accountable. Case in point, an advocate shares an experience of having their social media account restricted after expressing frustration with former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich for perceived silence on critical labor issues. While expressing such frustrations is part of open discourse, it underscores the difficulties faced when advocating for workers' rights in digital spaces. The impact of censorship not only silences individual voices, but also hampers the broader movement for workers' rights. When advocates are prevented from sharing their experiences and perspectives, it undermines efforts to raise awareness and push for necessary reforms. Standing up for free speech, advocates emphasize the importance of free speech in the fight for justice. By sharing their stories and challenging censorship, they strive to ensure that critical issues affecting workers are not ignored or suppressed. Chapter 18: Bridging the Gap, Media and Advocacy. The role of media in advocacy. Media personalities and journalists have a significant influence on public discourse. Their willingness to highlight issues can bring attention to neglected topics and drive policy changes. When these voices remain silent on critical issues, it represents a missed opportunity to advocate for those in need. A call for media engagement. Advocates urge media figures like Tom Hartman and others to step up and address the struggles of injured workers. Silence from trusted voices can contribute to the marginalization of important issues. By engaging with these topics, media personalities can educate the public and support efforts toward reform. The need for advocacy and education. More than just reporting, there is a need for media to actively advocate for change. This includes educating the audience about systemic failures, highlighting personal stories, and pushing for accountability among leaders and institutions. Chapter 19: Toward a Just Future. Acknowledging the past. Understanding the historical context of workers' rights and the erosion of protections is essential. Recognizing past failures and systemic injustices allows for a more informed approach to creating solutions. Collaborative efforts for change. Change requires collaboration among workers, advocates, leaders, and communities. By uniting diverse voices and perspectives, the movement for workers' rights can become more robust and effective. Policy recommendations. Establish federal standards. Implement minimum federal standards for workers' compensation to ensure consistent protections across all states. Improve access to legal aid. Increase funding for legal aid organizations and explore policies that guarantee the right to counsel in civil cases involving basic needs. Mental health support. Integrate mental health services into workers' compensation benefits, acknowledging the psychological impact of workplace injuries and systemic hurdles. Protect whistleblowers and advocates. Enact protections for individuals who speak out against systemic injustices to prevent harassment and legal retaliation. Media engagement. Encourage media outlets and personalities to highlight issues facing injured workers and advocate for reforms. Empowering workers. Amplifying the voices of workers who have experienced the system's shortcomings is crucial. Advocating for policies that prevent others from enduring similar hardships ensures that progress benefits everyone. Conclusion: bridging the divide and moving forward. Learning from personal experiences, individual stories, and expressions shed light on systemic failures and can guide more effective policy solutions. Recognizing the interconnectedness of workers' rights with other social justice issues strengthens the overall movement. Authentic leadership and representation. Demanding that those who represent workers understand and address their real challenges is essential. Authentic representation ensures that policies and reforms are grounded in the realities faced by workers. Vision for the future. Equitable society. Aim for a nation where workers are not forced to navigate bureaucratic mazes to receive basic support. Sustainable progress. Commit to ongoing evaluation and improvement of workers' rights protections. Collective action. By uniting workers, advocates, leaders, and communities, meaningful change can be achieved. By recognizing these interconnected issues and committing to collective action, we honor the experiences of those who have fought tirelessly for justice. Together, we can transform the silent struggle into a powerful movement for justice and equity. Appendices references and further reading. The Demolition of Workers' Compensation by ProPublica and NPR investigates the erosion of workers' compensation benefits. Personal accounts of workers' compensation struggles, collections of stories from individuals navigating the system. Studies on mental health and workers' compensation, research exploring the psychological impact of workplace injuries and systemic barriers. Legal resources for pro se litigants, guides and organizations that support individuals representing themselves in legal proceedings. Advocacy organizations, groups dedicated to reforming workers' compensation laws and providing support to injured workers. Artistic expressions in labor movements, analysis of how songs, poems, and art have contributed to labor rights advocacy. Organizations and resources. Legal aid societies provide assistance to those unable to afford legal representation. Worker advocacy groups support workers' rights and push for legislative reforms. First responder support networks offer resources for mental health and wellness. Policy initiatives, information on current efforts to establish a National Workers' Compensation Commission. Thank you for joining us on this comprehensive exploration of the challenges facing workers in America. By understanding personal narratives alongside historical context and systemic analysis, we can work toward a future where all workers are respected, protected, and empowered. Together, we can build a more just and equitable society for all.